Grace Hayes could not remember exactly when the bugle started playing. She only remembered the sky. It was gray, flat, and heavy, the kind of gray that made the whole cemetery feel like the world had gone quiet out of respect. In front of her, Captain Ethan Hayes lay beneath a perfectly stretched American flag, the red, white, and blue pulled so smooth it looked untouched by grief. Her husband was 36 years old. The man who used to leave his hoodie on the kitchen chair because he knew she would wear it when she missed him was now silent beneath folded honor and polished wood. Grace wore black. Her hair was pinned low and tight, the way she had worn it back when she still answered to Staff Sergeant Miller. One hand stayed inside her coat pocket, gripping the small service pin Ethan had given her years ago. She held it so hard the metal edge pressed into her palm. She did not let go. Some things felt dangerous to release. The rifle salute cracked through the air. Once, twice, 3 times. Grace did not flinch. Not because she was strong. Because people who had worn the uniform knew there were moments when even pain had to stand at attention. 2 soldiers stepped forward to fold the flag. Every movement was slow, deliberate, sacred. Grace watched their white-gloved hands lift each corner like they were touching the last piece of Ethan the world still knew how to honor. Then Colonel Samuel Reyes came toward her. He stopped in front of Grace, lowered himself to one knee, and held the folded flag in both hands. On behalf of a grateful nation, the words moved through her like winter air. Grace accepted the flag with both hands and drew it against her chest. Not like an object, like the final weight of a promise. That was when she heard Marjorie Hayes behind her. Her mother-in-law's voice was barely more than a whisper, but it was sharp enough to cut through the bugle, the wind, and everything Grace was trying not to feel. That flag should have been handed to his mother. Grace did not turn around. Not because she had not heard. Because if she turned, she was afraid the last thing she would remember from Ethan's funeral would be his mother looking at the flag in Grace's arms like it had been stolen from her. After the service, people began drifting away from the graveside in careful, respectful silence. Grace stayed where she was, holding the flag close. Marjorie approached her. Her eyes were red, but her voice was dry. "You're still young, Grace." Grace looked at her. Marjorie's gaze dropped to the flag. "One day you'll have another life, but I will never have another son." Grace kept her voice low. "Today is Ethan's day." Marjorie smiled faintly. "Exactly, so don't forget whose son he was." Grace said nothing. Behind Marjorie, Franklin Hayes was not looking at the grave anymore. His eyes moved from the flag to the funeral program in his hand, then to the small photo printed near the bottom. The house Grace and Ethan had bought together. The one with the blue front door and the porch Ethan had painted himself. Franklin stared at it for 1 second too long. Not like a grieving father, like a man calculating what was still left in someone else's name. Grace did not understand everything yet, but she felt something begin. "I thought that day would only be the day I buried my husband. I did not know I was about to spend the rest of my grief defending him from the people who carried his last name. Before Ethan was my husband, I knew him as Captain Hayes. And before I was Grace Hayes, I was Staff Sergeant Grace Miller, combat medic, the woman people called when blood made everyone else forget how to breathe. I met Ethan at a temporary medical station after a training exercise that left half the unit pretending they were fine. He walked in with a split eyebrow, mud on his jaw, and that reckless little grin men use when they want pain to look smaller than it is. "I'm fine," he said. I looked at the blood sliding toward his eye and said, "That is usually what people say right before they are not fine." He laughed, and that was the first thing I learned about Ethan Hayes. He joked when he was tired, he smiled when he hurt, and he watched everyone else so carefully that most people never noticed how much he was carrying. At first, we were coworkers, then friends. Then the 2 people who understood what other people politely looked away from. He understood why fireworks could make my whole body go still. I understood why he always sat facing the door. I understood why soldiers spoke loudest about the wounds that hurt least, and went silent around the ones that mattered. We got married in a small chapel with scratched wooden pews and cheap grocery store flowers. No ballroom. No perfect Hayes family portrait with everyone smiling like they had approved of me. Marjorie arrived late. Franklin shook Ethan's hand like he was congratulating a soldier, not blessing a son. Trevor leaned toward me during the reception and said, "Hope you know marrying military does not mean unlimited benefits." I smiled because some insults wear jokes like uniforms. Ethan heard him. That night, when we were finally alone, he touched my hand and said, "Do not let them make you feel like you have to prove why you belong. I chose you." I left the army before Ethan did. A shoulder injury and a damaged wrist ended the version of my life where I could run toward danger with a medical bag on my back. I took a job in a civilian emergency room where the uniforms changed, but the bleeding did not. Still, I kept records. I checked medication schedules. I remembered names. I stayed calm when rooms got loud, and I did not confuse tears with truth. That was what the Hayes family hated most about me. I was not easy to scare. I was not easy to shame. And I was not the kind of woman who could be manipulated just because someone used the word family like a weapon. They wanted people to see me as the young widow standing beside a hero's grave, waiting for benefits. But I was there before the flag, before the folded hands, before the speeches, before Ethan became a framed photograph people could cry in front of. I knew the man inside the uniform before his family tried to turn that uniform into something they could display when it served them. The Hayes family did not hate me because I took Ethan away from them. They hated me because when I stood beside him, it became harder for them to pretend they had always been there. Marjorie Hayes loved being called a military mom. She had the shirts, the bumper sticker, the framed photos, the social media captions every Memorial Day and Veterans Day. She posted Ethan in uniform more often than she called him when he was quiet for too long. She knew which picture made him look most heroic. She did not know the name of the physical therapist who helped him walk without limping. She knew how to cry in public when people thanked her for her sacrifice. She did not know which medication made him nauseous, or which nights he slept on the couch because lying flat hurt too much. Franklin Hayes was different, but not better. He did not perform grief the way Marjorie did. He performed pride. He liked telling people, "My son serves this country," like Ethan's uniform was proof that the Hayes name still produced men worth respecting. But when Ethan came home exhausted, Franklin's pride turned sharp. "He needs to toughen up," Franklin once told me over dinner. "A man cannot let pain become his personality." Ethan said nothing. He just looked down at his plate. Trevor was the youngest, but somehow the loudest when it came to things he had not earned. He had never served. He could not keep a job longer than a season. But he always had something to say about Ethan getting attention. "People act like wearing a uniform makes you a saint," he would say, usually while drinking beer Ethan had paid for. Then, when Ethan received praise, Trevor stood close enough to be included in the pictures. That was the Hayes family pattern. They wanted the shine, not the burden. From the beginning, they placed me outside the circle. Christmas cards said Ethan Hayes and wife, as if my name was too much effort. In family photos, Marjorie always guided me to the edge. When Ethan was promoted, she said, "I always knew my son would make us proud." Like I had not watched him study, train, ache, and fight through exhaustion to get there. When I reminded him to rest, Franklin said I was making him soft. When I said he needed support, Marjorie said I was trying to isolate him. When I stayed quiet, they called me cold. When I spoke, they called me controlling. The clearest moment came at a family dinner about a year before Ethan died. Marjorie was pouring wine, smiling too sweetly, when she looked at Ethan and said, "I heard you updated your beneficiary paperwork." The room changed. Ethan set his fork down. Marjorie continued, "You still have Grace listed as primary?" I was sitting right there. Ethan's voice stayed calm. "She is my wife." Marjorie's smile disappeared. "Wives can change, Ethan. Mothers do not." Nobody laughed. Nobody corrected her. Franklin stared into his glass. Trevor smirked like he had been waiting for someone to say it out loud. Ethan looked at his mother for a long moment and said, "You talk about me like I am property." Marjorie began to cry immediately. And just like that, Ethan became the cruel son. I became the woman poisoning him. And Marjorie became the victim of a conversation she had started. That was how that family worked. Truth did not matter. Only who could perform pain convincingly enough to avoid responsibility. And maybe that was why they feared me most. Because I had been trained to keep people alive under pressure, and I knew the difference between a real wound and a performance. They did not hate me because I took Ethan from them. They hated me because I was living proof that when Ethan needed family, they had mostly offered an audience. 3 years before Ethan died, he was injured during a training operation that everyone later described as non-fatal, as if surviving automatically meant the damage was small. It was not small. He tore his knee badly enough to need surgery. He came home with nerve pain that made his jaw clench in the middle of conversations. He stopped sleeping through the night. He stopped laughing the same way. He could still stand straight when other people were watching, but I could see what it cost him when the door closed. The army knew how to treat the injury on paper. I learned how to treat the man. I signed forms when his hand shook too much to hold the pen. I sat beside his hospital bed and watched the monitor blink through the dark. I learned how to change the dressing without pulling the skin. I set alarms for medication. I kept track of which pills made him dizzy and which ones made him too quiet. When he came home, I helped him into the shower because he could not bend his leg. I installed a rail near the bathroom wall after he almost slipped. I slept lightly because pain changed his breathing before he admitted anything was wrong. One night, around 2 a.m, I found him sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. He whispered, "I do not know if I am still a soldier." I sat beside him and said, "I did not fall in love with the uniform. I fell in love with the man inside it." He cried then, not loudly. Ethan never broke loudly. He broke like someone trying not to wake the house. Marjorie called on video once. She cried before Ethan even finished saying hello. She told him seeing him like that would destroy her, then spent the rest of the call talking about how hard it was for a mother to watch her son suffer from a distance. From a distance. That was the part she chose. Franklin called later and told Ethan he needed discipline, not pity. "Do not let yourself get used to being weak," he said. Ethan went very still after that. I took the phone from him and ended the call before Franklin could do more damage. Trevor did not visit at all. He said he had a job interview and hospitals made him uncomfortable. That weekend, he posted a picture of himself fishing with 2 beers in a cooler and a caption about needing peace. When Ethan needed someone to stay with him for 2 full weeks after surgery, Marjorie said her back was acting up. Franklin said work was impossible to leave. Trevor said he was not good with medical stuff, so I took unpaid leave. Our savings thinned out fast. I paid for medication insurance did not fully cover. I drove him to physical therapy. I picked up extra emergency room shifts after he fell asleep because bills do not pause for grief, pain, or military pride. The Hayes family did not send money. They did not send meals. They did not send help. But when Ethan recovered enough to appear at a small ceremony months later, Marjorie arrived in a navy dress, held his arm in front of every camera, and said, "Our family got through this together." I was standing 3 feet away, exhausted, with a bruise on my arm from my own hospital shift and dark circles I could no longer hide. No one photographed me. That night, Ethan sat at the kitchen table and stared at the picture Marjorie had posted. The caption said, "A mother never leaves her soldier." He laughed once, but there was nothing happy in it. "If something ever happens to me," he said, "I do not want them standing up and telling my story." I told him not to talk like that, but Ethan was already thinking ahead. He updated his paperwork. Beneficiary forms, personal effects, the house, the medals, the flag, the things no one should have been fighting over while he was alive, and the things he somehow knew they might fight over when he was gone. He did not do it because he hated them. He did it because he finally understood something that hurt too much to say out loud. They wanted to be the family of a hero. They did not want to be the family of a wounded man. The morning Ethan left for his final deployment did not feel cinematic. There was no rain against the windows, no dramatic silence, no feeling that the world was warning me to memorize everything. It was just our kitchen at 5:18 in the morning, too much coffee in the pot, a half-zipped duffel bag on the floor, and Ethan standing barefoot by the counter while I checked his packing list, like I had not left the army years ago. "You know," he said, watching me fold another pair of socks into the side pocket, "most wives just say goodbye." I looked at him. Most wives did not spend years treating blisters caused by men who packed like idiots. He smiled at that. Not his full smile, the smaller one. The one that meant he was trying to make the room easier for both of us. I checked his medical kit twice. He let me. Ethan knew better than to interrupt a medic with anxiety and a clipboard. On the back of the kitchen chair, his old gray hoodie was hanging loose, the one with frayed cuffs and a faded logo across the chest. "You forgot your hoodie," I said. "No, I didn't." I turned. He shrugged, like it was nothing. "You wear it when you miss me." My throat tightened so fast I had to look away. Do not start that, I said. I am not starting anything. Yes, you are. You are being weird and sentimental before sunrise, and I do not accept it. That made him laugh softly. Then he crossed the kitchen and touched my face with one hand. His palm was warm, rough, real. If something happens, he said, do not let anyone tell you that you are not my family. I pushed his hand away because I hated those words. Ethan, I mean it, Grace. You are coming home. He nodded, but his eyes stayed on mine. I am planning to. Those were the last normal words I got to keep. A few weeks later, 2 officers came to my door. I knew before they spoke. People who have worn the uniform know the shape of bad news. It stands too straight. It does not look away. It says your name gently because it is about to take the rest of your life apart. Captain Ethan Hayes had been killed during an attack while protecting members of his unit. They told me he did not die alone. They told me he acted with courage. They told me the words people are trained to say when there is no sentence in the world cruel enough or kind enough to carry the truth. I did not scream. I did not faint. I stood so still, one of the officers asked if I needed to sit down. I said, keep going, I need to hear everything. That was the soldier in me. After they left, I made it as far as the kitchen before my knees gave out. I found his hoodie on the chair, pulled it against my chest, and made a sound I did not recognize as my own. Marjorie called later that afternoon. She was sobbing before I even answered. But the first clear sentence she managed was not, are you okay? It was, did they say anything about the benefits? I went silent. She caught herself quickly. I mean the process, she said, the paperwork. I am his mother, Grace. I deserve to understand. I stared at Ethan's hoodie in my hands and remembered what he had told me. Do not let anyone tell you that you are not my family. That was the day I lost my husband. And before the sun even went down, I understood that some people had already started reading his death like a claim form. The funeral was supposed to be simple. That was what Ethan would have wanted. No long speeches, no dramatic slideshow, no strangers using his death as proof that they had always understood the cost of his life. Just honor, discipline, and the people who had actually known the man beneath the rank. But Marjorie Hayes had a different vision. She called me 3 times the day after the notification officers came to my house. The first call was about flowers. The second was about seating. The third was about whether the local paper had been contacted. People will want to know what this family has lost, she said. This family? Not you, not his wife. This family. I was too numb to fight every word. So I chose the things that mattered most. Ethan's uniform, the music, the chaplain he respected, Colonel Reyes speaking instead of some distant relative who only knew Ethan through holiday photos. Marjorie fought me on that too. A mother should speak, she said. I told her she could share a short memory at the reception. She went quiet, then said, you are handling this like an event coordinator, Grace, not like a grieving widow. That was the first time I understood what they wanted from me. If I was calm, I was cold. If I cried, I was unstable. If I made decisions, I was controlling. If I stepped back, they would erase me. The printed funeral program arrived for approval the next morning. I opened the file at my kitchen table, still wearing Ethan's hoodie, and stared at the wording until my eyes burned. Captain Ethan Hayes, beloved son of Marjorie and Franklin Hayes, beloved brother of Trevor Hayes. Near the bottom, almost like a legal note, it said, survived by his wife Grace, not beloved wife, not partner, not the woman he chose, just wife. A title placed there because removing it entirely would have been too obvious. When I called Marjorie, she sighed. Grace, this is not the time to be sensitive about wording. I said, it is my husband's funeral. She answered, and it is my son's, as if one truth had to cancel the other. At the service, she wore black lace and grief like she had practiced both in a mirror. She cried when people approached her. She lowered her head when cameras appeared. She held tissues in one hand and Ethan's childhood photo in the other. Franklin stood beside her, serious and stiff, accepting handshakes like a man receiving condolences for a legacy. Trevor kept drifting near the display table. At one point, he leaned close to me and said, did Ethan ever say what he wanted done with his service watch? I looked at him. He has not even been buried yet. Trevor swallowed, then tried to smile. I just meant, some things should stay with the Hayes family. I turned away before I said something Ethan would have had to forgive me for. Colonel Reyes spoke near the end. His voice was steady but not empty. He did not call Ethan a perfect soldier. He called him the man who always checked the person walking behind everyone else. The officer who noticed silence. The friend who remembered what people carried when they thought no one was looking. That was when I almost broke. Because that was Ethan, not the framed hero Marjorie wanted to display. The man, my man. Then came the flag. The soldiers folded it slowly, carefully, every movement sharp enough to hurt. Colonel Reyes carried it to me, lowered himself to one knee and placed it in my hands. I held it against my chest. Behind me, I felt Marjorie go rigid. After the ceremony, while people moved toward their cars, one of Marjorie's cousins touched my arm and whispered, "You will let his mother keep the flag, won't you? She needs it more." I did not answer quickly enough. Marjorie stepped close. "Keep it today," she said softly. "I will not embarrass my son at his own funeral." Her eyes dropped to the flag. "But this is not finished." That was when I realized the funeral had not only been a goodbye. For the Hayes family, it had been the opening argument. 2 days after the funeral, they came to my house without calling first. I was still wearing Ethan's hoodie, the one he had left on the kitchen chair before his final deployment. It smelled less like him every day, and that alone felt like another kind of death. The living room was full of funeral flowers, white lilies on the coffee table, sympathy cards stacked near the lamp. A casserole dish from one of Ethan's soldiers sat untouched on the counter because I could not make myself eat anything that required swallowing. The folded flag rested in its case on the table beside me. That was the first thing Marjorie looked at when she walked in. Not my face, not the dark circles under my eyes, not the house where her son had lived and laughed and healed. The flag. Then Franklin stepped in behind her, carrying a folder. Trevor came last, hands in his pockets, scanning the room like he was already deciding where his things might fit. I stood in the doorway and said, "This is not a good time." Marjorie gave me a soft smile that did not reach her eyes. "There will never be a good time for this, Grace." Franklin moved past me without waiting to be invited and placed the folder on the coffee table. "We need to discuss Ethan's estate before emotions make everything more complicated." Estate, not grief, not memory. Estate. I looked at the folder, then at all three of them. Ethan has not even been in the ground for 72 hours. Franklin's jaw tightened, which is exactly why this should be handled clearly. Marjorie sat on the edge of the couch like she was visiting a stranger's home, not the home her son had built with his wife. "We are not here to fight," she said. Trevor muttered, "Unless she makes us." I turned to him. "Excuse me?" He looked away. Franklin opened the folder. Inside was a printed list, typed, organized, prepared. That was the part that made my stomach turn. They had made a list. They wanted a portion of Ethan's life insurance. They wanted his medals for family preservation. They wanted his dog tags, his service watch, his journals, his dress uniform, access to the garage and office to collect Hayes property. They wanted Trevor to move into the guest room temporarily because, as Marjorie put it, a widow should not be alone in a house this size. Then Franklin slid one paper closer. It said that if I ever remarried, the house should return to the Hayes family. For a second, I just stared at it. Then I asked, "When did you prepare this?" No one answered. Marjorie's voice softened. That was always when she became most dangerous. "You are young, Grace. One day you will move forward. You may marry again. You may have another family." I felt my hand close around the sleeve of Ethan's hoodie. "I had a family," Franklin said. "You had a husband. We had blood." Trevor leaned forward. "And Ethan would not want some other man living in his house someday, spending money he died for." The room went very still. I looked at him and said, "Ethan was not a bank account waiting to be divided." Marjorie began to cry then. Not quiet tears, performance tears, the kind that asked the room to forget who had started the fire. "I gave birth to him," she said. "I carried him. I raised him. I was his mother before you even knew his name." I said, "And I was the one holding him when he did not want to keep living." Her crying stopped. For 1 second, all three of them looked exposed. Then Franklin stood. "You are being cruel." "No," I said. "Cruel is bringing paperwork to a widow's house before the flowers from her husband's funeral have wilted." Trevor scoffed. "You are acting like we are strangers." I looked from him to Marjorie to Franklin. "You made me one every chance you got." Marjorie's face hardened. "You think a marriage certificate makes you more family than his own mother?" I reached for my phone, turned on the recorder, and set it on the table between us. From this point on, any conversation about my husband's property, benefits, medals, flag, or home will happen through my attorney or with a recording. Marjorie stared at the phone like it had insulted her. Franklin picked up the folder slowly. "You just chose war with the Hayes family. I looked at the flag beside me. No, I said. You chose war with Ethan's last wishes. For the first time since they walked in, none of them had an answer. After they left, the house felt dirtier. Not because they had touched anything exactly. They had been careful about that. Franklin had picked up his folder. Marjorie had wiped her tears before walking out. Trevor had made sure not to look too disappointed when he realized he was not leaving with a key. But the air still felt changed, like greed had sat down in Ethan's chair and left fingerprints everywhere. I locked the front door, then checked it twice. After that, I stood in the living room with the folded flag on the table, the flowers dying around it, and my phone still showing the recording I had made of them asking for pieces of my husband before his grave marker had even been placed. For 10 minutes, I did nothing. Then I called Maya Caldwell. Maya was the attorney who had helped Ethan update his paperwork before his final deployment. She was military adjacent in the way some people are when they have spent years watching families learn that signatures matter most after someone dies. Calm voice, sharp eyes. No patience for emotional theater disguised as legal concern. When she answered, I said, "They came to the house." She did not ask who. She only exhaled once. What did they want? I looked at the folder of copied documents Franklin had left behind when he stormed out too quickly. Insurance, medals, dog tags, the house if I ever remarry. Trevor wanted to move in. Maya was quiet long enough for the silence to become an answer. Then she said, "Grace, there is something Ethan left with me." My hand tightened around the phone. What do you mean? He did not want me to give it to you unless his family challenged his choices, pressured you, or tried to make you defend your place in his life. I sat down slowly. Maya, I know. No, you do not. I just buried him. Her voice softened, but only a little. Maya was kind, not weak. I know, and I'm sorry, but Ethan prepared this because he did not want you standing alone if they did exactly what they just did. I drove to her office that afternoon because grief had already made my house feel too small. Maya handed me a small black USB drive. That was all. No dramatic envelope, no handwritten label, no final letter folded with perfect timing. Just a little piece of plastic resting in her palm, small enough to disappear between my fingers, heavy enough to make me feel like my ribs were closing around my lungs. What is on it? I asked. A video. My eyes burned immediately. Maya placed the USB on the desk between us like it was evidence and mercy at the same time. He recorded it before he deployed. He said it was only to be used if the Hayes family disputed your rights, spread lies about you, or tried to take things he clearly assigned to you. I stared at it. I cannot hear his voice today. I understand. No, I said. I mean, if I hear him, I do not know what happens to me. Maya leaned forward. Grace, he did not record this to hurt you. He recorded it so you would not have to convince anyone you were loved. That broke me more than if she had been gentle. I brought the USB home and waited until dark to open it. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that only exists after someone dies and leaves all their things behind to accuse the room of still standing. I sat on the couch in front of Ethan's flag, opened my laptop, and clicked the file. Ethan appeared on the screen, not in uniform, not standing tall in some heroic photograph. He was sitting at our kitchen table in an old blue t-shirt, hair messy, one hand wrapped around a coffee mug. His face looked tired, real, so painfully alive that I stopped breathing. He looked into the camera for several seconds before speaking. Gracie, he said, and my whole body folded around the sound of my name. If you are watching this, it means I am not there to stand beside you. I am sorry. I covered my mouth. He looked down, laughed once under his breath, then looked back at the camera. I have tried recording this 3 times. Every version feels stupid, so I'm just going to say it badly and hope you understand me. That was Ethan. Even from a screen, even from the other side of death, he still sounded like the man who hated sounding dramatic. I hope I am wrong, he continued. I hope my family surprises me. I hope they love you well because you were the best thing that ever happened to me. His jaw tightened. But if they make you hear the words "you are not family," then I need you to remember something. They do not get to decide that. I already did. I sobbed then, hard enough that the laptop blurred. Ethan kept speaking. There are things about after I got hurt that I never wanted to say in front of them. Not because they are innocent, because I was tired of being the son who had to comfort everyone else about what they failed to do. My hand moved to the trackpad. I could not do it. Not yet. The next words came out of him softer. If they push you, play the rest. I paused the video. The screen froze with Ethan looking slightly away from the camera, like he was gathering courage. I shut the laptop. For a while, I just sat there in the dark, shaking. I did not know everything he had said. I did not want to know yet, but I knew enough. Ethan had known this might happen. He had hoped he was wrong, and he had loved me enough to prepare for the possibility that he was not. Maya called later and told me not to use the video out of anger. Let them reveal the pattern, she said. Only use it if they turn your silence into a weapon. I promised her I would wait. I wanted to believe I would never need to press play again. Then that same night, Marjorie made her first public post. Marjorie's first post went up at 9:17 that night. I know the exact time because I had just closed Ethan's laptop. His face was still burned into my mind, frozen on the screen in that old blue t-shirt, looking like a man trying to protect me from a future he hoped would never arrive. Then my phone buzzed. At first, I almost ignored it. Grief had made every notification feel violent, but then another message came, then another. Then my cousin from my side of the family sent one sentence. Grace, what is she talking about? I opened the link. Marjorie had posted a photo of Ethan in uniform, one hand resting on her shoulder, both of them smiling at a ceremony from years ago. The caption was long, polished, and poisonous. There is no pain greater than losing a son, except losing him and then being forced to beg a stranger for the last pieces of him. Some people enter a family through paperwork and forget that blood came first. I only pray Captain Ethan Hayes' true legacy is returned to the people who loved him before benefits had a dollar amount. She did not use my name. She did not need to. The comments were already filling up. Give his mother the flag. Some widows move on fast when the check clears. Blood should always come before marriage. That insurance money belongs to his parents, too. Poor Marjorie, I cannot imagine losing a son and then being treated like this. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Treated like this. As if she had not come into my living room with a typed list. As if Franklin had not demanded a legal claim to the house Ethan painted with his own hands. As if Trevor had not looked around my home like he was measuring space for his furniture. Then Trevor shared the post. My brother deserved to be remembered by his real family, not by someone who can change her last name when the next man comes along. That one hit differently. Not because I believed him, because Ethan had known they would say it. If they say you will remarry, remind them that your future does not erase what you stayed through. I almost opened the video again. Instead, I called Maya. She answered on the second ring. Do not respond, she said before I even spoke. You have not seen it. I know enough. They are calling me a stranger. Let them, she said. Every word they write is evidence of motive. The next morning, it got worse. A woman from the Veterans Auxiliary messaged me and said, I hope you search your heart and return his flag to his mother. A man who had never met Ethan wrote, a wife gets benefits. A mother gets grief. Do the right thing. Someone commented under an old photo of Ethan and me, enjoy the money. That was the one that made my hands shake. I wanted to scream that there was no amount of money that could replace the sound of Ethan's keys by the door. No check that could bring back the weight of his hand on my back when I had a nightmare. No survivor benefit that made the bed less empty. But the internet does not want truth when grief has already become entertainment. By afternoon, Colonel Reyes called. His voice was careful. Grace, I need to ask you something. Did the Hayes family get permission to host a memorial fundraiser in Ethan's name? I went still. What fundraiser? He was quiet for one beat too long. They are organizing an event at the Veterans Hall, preserving Captain Ethan Hayes' legacy. There is a donation page attached. I opened the link while he stayed on the phone. There was Ethan's face again. His rank. His service history. A paragraph about helping the Hayes family recover stolen personal effects and preserve his military honor. Stolen. That was what they were calling the things Ethan had legally left to me. Colonel Reyes said, I do not like how this looks. I almost laughed. Nothing about it looked hidden anymore. Maya told me to gather everything. The beneficiary forms, the house documents, Ethan's written instructions, the recording from my living room, screenshots of every post, every comment, every message, every request for donations. Then she said, do you still have the video? I looked toward the closed laptop. Yes, bring it, but do not use it unless they force your hand. I knew what she meant. If I exposed the video too early, they would call me cruel, vindictive, a widow using a dead man's voice as a weapon. So I made myself a promise. I would not play Ethan's video because they insulted me. I would not play it because they called me greedy. I would not even play it because they tried to turn strangers against me. But if they touched the flag, the last honor placed in my hands by the country Ethan died serving, then silence was over. They wanted a stage. They wanted witnesses. They wanted the world to see me as the woman who stole from a grieving mother. So I decided to go. Not to beg, not to explain, not to ask the Hayes family to admit I belonged. I went to hear how far they were willing to lie before Ethan answered for himself. The Veterans Hall looked more decorated than Ethan's funeral. That was the first thing I noticed. White flowers lined the entrance. Candles flickered beneath framed photographs of Ethan in uniform. A large banner stretched across the front of the room in dark blue letters, preserving Captain Ethan Hayes' legacy. Underneath it, on a small table near the podium, sat a donation box. Not a memory book, not a folded program, a donation box. There were printed cards beside it, with a QR code and the words Hayes Family Memorial Fund. Trevor stood close to the table, greeting people like he had been assigned to guard the money from everyone except himself. I walked in wearing a plain black dress and carrying Ethan's flag case in both arms. I had not planned to bring it at first. The idea of carrying it into a room full of people who had already judged me felt unbearable. But after everything Marjorie had written, after the way strangers had begun speaking about that flag like it was evidence against me, I could not leave it alone in the house. Not anymore. The room shifted when people saw me. Conversations dropped into whispers. Heads turned. Someone near the coffee table looked from me to the flag and then quickly away, like my grief had made them uncomfortable only after Marjorie told them it should. Marjorie stood near the front in a black dress, one hand pressed to her chest while a woman hugged her. Franklin was beside the podium, shaking hands with two older men. He had that solemn expression he used when he wanted people to think discipline was the same as dignity. Marjorie saw me and froze for half a second. Then she smiled. It was the same smile she had worn at my wedding reception. Thin, controlled, sharp around the edges. "I did not think you would come," she said when I reached the front row. I looked at the banner behind her. "You used my husband's name." Her mouth tightened. "My son's name." "Both can be true," I said. Her eyes dropped to the flag case in my arms. The softness left her face. The program began 5 minutes later. Marjorie walked to the podium slowly, like every step cost her something sacred. She spoke about Ethan as a baby, Ethan as a boy, Ethan as a son. She talked about the first time he wore a uniform, the pride she felt, the sacrifice she carried. She did not say my name once. Franklin spoke next. He talked about heritage, blood, duty, and how families had a responsibility to preserve what belonged to them. Trevor followed with a speech so rehearsed it almost sounded sincere. "My brother would want his real family taken care of," he said. A few people looked at me. I held the flag case tighter. Then Marjorie returned to the microphone. "Some of Ethan's personal effects and rightful family possessions are currently being withheld," she said, voice trembling. "We are asking for support as we pursue the return of his legacy to the people who raised him, loved him, and gave him his name." That was when I stood. The chair legs scraped against the floor. Every face turned. I kept my voice even. "Are you raising money to sue me for the life insurance Ethan legally left to his wife?" The room went silent. Marjorie placed one hand over her heart. "I am raising awareness for a mother's grief." "No," I said. "You are raising money off a dead man's name while accusing his widow of stealing what he chose to leave behind." Trevor stepped forward. "You already got enough." I looked at him. "I lost my husband. You lost access to his bank account. Do not pretend those are the same kind of grief." A sound moved through the room. Not quite a gasp, not quite agreement, just the first crack in the story they had built. Marjorie stepped down from the platform. Her eyes were fixed on the flag. "Give it to me," she said. "No, I am his mother, and I am his wife." Her face crumpled, but there were no tears this time. "You will remarry," she said, louder now. "You will move on. You will pack his things in boxes and let another man sleep in his bed. I am the one who lost a child." I felt something inside me go very still. "You do not get to measure love by how loudly you can predict my future." Marjorie reached for the flag case. I stepped back. She grabbed one edge anyway. For one suspended second, the room forgot how to breathe. The case tilted between us. Then Colonel Reyes stood. His voice cut across the hall. "Mrs. Hayes, step back." Marjorie did not let go. "That flag belongs to his family." Colonel Reyes came forward, his face controlled in the way only a career officer's anger could be controlled. "It was presented to Captain Hayes' next of kin." Marjorie's grip tightened. I gave birth to him. My hands shook around the case, but my voice did not, and I held him when he thought he was too broken to keep living. I changed his bandages when you said hospitals were too hard for you. I helped him stand when Franklin told him weakness was a choice. I listened to him cry at 2 a.m. because he thought his own family was ashamed of the wounded version of him. No one moved. I looked straight at Marjorie. Do not stand in front of me and tell this room who loved Ethan better. Colonel Reyes placed one steady hand on the flag case and looked at Marjorie. This flag belongs to the person who stayed when everyone else only came back after there was money. Marjorie released the case like it had burned her, but it was too late. Everyone in that room had seen her reach for it, and for the first time that night, they were not looking at me like the woman who stole from a grieving mother. They were looking at her like the mother who had just tried to tear a soldier's final honor out of his widow's hands. Franklin was the first to try to repair the room. Not apologize, repair. He stepped between Marjorie and Colonel Reyes, as if the problem was not that his wife had tried to grab a soldier's flag, but that too many people had seen it. Colonel, Franklin said, with respect, you do not understand our family. Colonel Reyes did not move. I understand Captain Hayes, he said, and I understand who he chose to speak for him when he no longer could. Marjorie shook her head. He would never turn against us. I looked at her and felt something settle inside me. No, I said. He recorded this because he was afraid you would force him to protect me after he was gone. Maya Caldwell stepped forward from the back of the hall. She had been there quietly the whole time, holding a slim folder against her chest. Franklin recognized her first. His face changed before Marjorie even understood why. Maya looked at me once. That was the question. The last chance to keep Ethan's voice private. I looked at the flag case in my arms, then at Marjorie's hand, still trembling from where she had tried to take it. I handed Maya the USB. My husband left this video with his attorney, I said. He ordered it to be used only if his family challenged his wishes, spread public lies about me, or tried to take what he legally left in my care. Trevor muttered, "This is sick." I turned to him. No, what is sick is needing a dead man to explain consent to his own family. Maya connected the file to the projector. The screen went black. Then Ethan appeared, not in uniform, not smiling beside a flag. He sat at our kitchen table in his old blue t-shirt, hair messy, coffee mug near one hand. The sight of him made the whole room smaller. He looked tired. He looked alive. If you are watching this, he said, then I was right about something I prayed I was wrong about. Marjorie made a small sound. Ethan looked into the camera. Grace did not take anything from me. I gave it to her. She is my wife. She is my next of kin. She is the person I chose because she stayed when staying was hard. The room went completely silent. When I was injured, my mother called and cried, but she did not come. My father told me weakness was a choice. Trevor asked me for money while Grace was helping me learn how to stand up from a bed without falling. Trevor stared at the floor. Ethan's voice broke slightly, but he kept going. Grace changed my bandages. Grace managed my medication. Grace sat on the bathroom floor with me at 2 a.m. when I thought I was not a man anymore. She told me she loved me, not the uniform, not the rank, not the version people liked posting online. I could not see clearly anymore. Ethan leaned closer to the camera. So if my family says blood matters more than marriage, ask them where that blood was when I was bleeding, ashamed and afraid to be seen. No one moved. The insurance, the house, my medals, my dog tags, my service watch, and the flag are Grace's. If she chooses to share anything, that is her choice, not her obligation. And if anyone says she will remarry someday, remind them her future does not erase what she survived with me. He paused. Then came the sentence that emptied the room. Blood gave me a name, Grace gave me a home. The video ended. No music, no applause, just Ethan's face disappearing into black. Maya handed documents to the Veterans Hall director. Beneficiary forms, written instructions, the recording from my living room, screenshots of the fundraiser, and the posts accusing me of stealing Ethan's legacy. The director read in silence. This donation page is closed immediately, he said. Someone removed the Hayes Family Memorial Fund sign from the table. A man who had donated earlier turned to Franklin. Where was this money actually going? Franklin had no answer. Marjorie looked at me with wet, furious eyes. You made him say those things. I shook my head. No, you made him believe he had to. Colonel Reyes lifted the flag case carefully, checked that it had not been damaged, and handed it back to me with both hands. This time, everyone understood what they were watching. Not a widow taking something, a soldier's final choice being honored. After the video ended, people kept looking at me like victory should have looked different. Maybe they expected me to smile. Maybe they expected one final line sharp enough to make Marjorie feel what she had tried to make me carry. But standing there with Ethan's flag in my arms and his voice still hanging in the room, I did not feel victorious. I felt tired. I felt emptied out. And for the first time since the officers came to my door, I felt free from proving what Ethan had already known. If you have ever been treated like an outsider by people who only remember family when something can be claimed, I need you to hear me clearly. Family is not always the person with the same last name. It is not always the person who cries loudest in public, posts the most photos, or makes a room feel guilty on command. Sometimes family is the person beside a hospital bed after visiting hours are over. The person learning the medication schedule. The person helping you stand when your body feels like it has betrayed you. The person hearing the worst thing you believe about yourself and staying anyway. I did not keep Ethan's insurance to punish Marjorie. I did not keep our house to humiliate Franklin. I did not keep his medals, his dog tags, or his flag because I wanted to prove I hurt more than a mother. I kept them because Ethan chose me while he was alive, clear-minded and fully aware of who had stayed and who only liked the photograph of him standing tall. Marjorie never truly apologized. A week later, she sent a message saying I had humiliated a grieving mother. I did not answer. Franklin's attorney sent one letter. Maya responded with Ethan's paperwork, the recording from my living room, and the video authorization. We never heard from him again. Trevor deleted his posts, but not because he was sorry. He deleted them because people had finally seen the pattern. And me. I placed the flag in the living room, near the window Ethan used to open every morning. Not as a trophy, not as a weapon, as a reminder. Love does not become less real because someone calls it temporary. Marriage does not become less sacred because blood feels entitled. And grief does not belong to the person who can perform it best. The flag was never proof that I won. It was proof that Ethan's final choice survived the people who tried to rewrite it. So tell me honestly, if you were me after they abandoned him when he was wounded, smeared me when he died, and tried to pull that flag from my hands, would you share anything with them? Or would you let the truth decide?